All right, everybody, welcome back to our series of episodes on Brian De Palma. This is our third one, and we're going to cover what I think might be my favorite De Palma film.
Might be your favorite?
It might be.
As a huge Brian De Palma fan, I'm going to spit it out. I think a reason why I don't even put it in my top five, but it's one of his, it's the only one that's straightforward. There's really no, what's going on, or we're not supposed to watch, the voyeurism aspects or hints of elf. It's kind of straightforward.
It is straightforward, but I'm going to discuss why I think it's different than most other films of its time period, and different from a lot of other De Palma's films in that I don't think he takes. I don't want to say it's risky because it's less De Palma.
Yes, yeah.
Because he takes on a couple of different ideas that he doesn't normally play with, and I think. Definitely not, we talked about he thought his masterpiece was Carlito's Way.
Yes.
And this is not his masterpiece, even if it is my favorite film of his.
It's his most celebrated.
So I really want to break down The Untouchables with you today, because it's I don't know, I got lots to say about it. It's been like 15 years since I last watched it, so I was really excited to see it again. And today on Kyle and Nick on Film, we're going to break down The Untouchables. Talking The Untouchables today, the least De Palma film that there is.
In the mid-'80s, Brian De Palma wanted to do this movie based on actually the TV show, not really the true events of The Untouchables, so a lot of it is not really a whole lot actually true.
Yeah.
There are peppered of true stuff that happened, but here it is, it's almost an allegory essence of what the whole story is.
Well, so yeah, it's kind of a confusing one, because you mentioned it is kind of partially based on this show.
Yeah.
It's partially based on the book that the show was based on, and then partially based on true events. But I think there's no denying that the visual sense and De Palma's directing make it very obvious that this is not a true story, like version of events. And I don't think that movies inherently need to be 100% historically accurate.
You can't, because the lawyers will eat it up, right?
Well, they'll eat it up, but you'll never know what certain people said in certain scenes, and you'll never just get it 100% anyway. And I think if you try to capture what the heart and soul of what the characters are doing, then I think you get. If you completely betray who someone is, that's where you if you show Charlie Manson in a movie as like a fun party dude, that's a betrayal of who that person was.
And anytime you really want to do 100% based on a true story, you're going to run into some legal troubles with that's not what I said, or that's not what I wore. So you have to do a little bit of liberated to get a little more creative freedom, so you don't get bothered.
Exactly. So the film, set during Prohibition, follows Elliot Ness, who's a United States federal agent that tries to put together a by the books, uncorrupted, untouchable, if you will, team of people, and hunt down Al Capone and other bootleggers in Chicago.
At the time, one of the criticisms that was made is the music is actually a little too modern for the set piece. And actually, if you go back to old reviews, people were upset that the music score didn't really fit to at the time. And actually, it's modern. We talked about The Keep was based on something that is supposed to take place in World War II, and here we have synthesizer keyboard music of the 80s. This is kind of the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, but let me make an argument for it, because I do think Ennio Morricone's score in this film is not just one of my favorite Morricone scores.
It's beautiful.
It's one of my favorite scores ever.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard it in a while. When Morricone passed away last year, I was listening to some of my favorite scores of his. Just pulling them up on YouTube, and this one came across, and I didn't even look at the screen to see which one it was, because I knew in my heart that it was The Untouchables. And then my entire arm got chills.
Yeah, it does that.
And I thought back to the scene where they're on horseback. When that big, resounding boomful, music pops in. It got me wired. And I think, it definitely modernized music, but that plays into my chief strength of this movie, in that because it's not based on a true, it's not based on a true story. It's based on true-ish events. This is an American folklore. This is as close to an American folklore legend.
It's very mythological. Very mythological.
And so these are our heroes, these are the people that we brave. You can read a book if you want to know the true story. I want to know the heart of what was going on.
So, we talked about in the previous episode, Brian De Palma using the bridge to emphasize and the metaphor and the transition of the story, and it didn't really work very well. But here, he uses it twice to really emphasize the story, and because David Mamet is a wonderful writer, the uses of bridges is wonderful because we have the introduction of Jimmy Malone, Sean Connery, on the bridge. He's going to bring him, the bridge is kind of cementing him to carry out the story, right? He's gonna,
and Malone is representing like almost the devil on his shoulder in that he wants to be a by the books, no hold bar, correct person, and Malone's character is here to tell him
carry him the way,
do it that way. Like you can't beat them that way. If you play them by the books, you will lose because they are not by the books.
It's great with the whole emphasis of introducing on the bridge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the transitionary character that really heightens Ness's character to a person like that. He does slowly kind of unhinge himself from the rules that he set in place.
And then the famous speech of what probably won Sean Connery the Oscar, the speech that's set in a church, which kind of like the sanctuary. Like we can talk this way here. We can't talk this anyway outside of Chicago, but here in church we can talk this way where we're safe. And we'll explain what it's like to be out there.
Yep. And that scene was originally written to be on a street. And Connery was the one who said, there's no way two guys would talk about this on the street. The only safe place for these guys to talk is in a church, and I'm Irish Catholic. So,
but I like that it makes sense because you have this it's like diploma. It's very allegorical. It's all the lighting and reflections and blocking, and fits very well of almost praying that this is going to work.
Yeah. And you mentioned Mamet's script, and we talked on a previous episode about Femme Fatale about how I think De Palma's best work is as a director working from someone else's script. Having input on the script, absolutely. But I think he needs someone to translate the ideas. Yeah. He worked on the script for Untouchables, but there's a reason he doesn't have a credit on it. And that's because he allowed Mamet to do his thing, and he gave input, and he worked with him. But Mamet really wrote that screenplay. And that's why I think this film, as straightforward as it is, which is unusual for Mamet and unusual for De Palma, it captivates from beginning to end. It's a slow ratcheting up of events.
So, like I said at the beginning, which you have to use classic overhead shots. But at no point does it seem to lull. Like in Femme Fatale, it seems to, we're kind of slow down. But here, the beats, it's almost like a 4/4 rock band. We're going boom, 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 the transition, which never seems to slow down.
Yeah, it's almost as though each sequence that builds on the previous one is De Palma setting up this giant domino set. And eventually he's going to push that first domino over. And it's nowhere is it more apparent than in that staircase scene, that he took from Battleship Potemkin.
The Odessa step scene.
Yeah,
Battleship
and
Potemkin.
that's that great sequence where what's got to take place. And then we start introducing dominoes, and we start setting up this, nerve-wracking, tension-filled scene that makes that payoff so strong. It's like not eating all day, and then you get a cheeseburger. It's so worth it at the end.
Yeah. So I'd say not only did the music work, the costuming by Giorgio Armani really, really worked.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
In fact, I think they found one of Al Capone's tailors. They actually use him in the movie.
So I was reading, De Niro was such a method actor on this film that he got, right? He was such a method actor on the film that he found the tailor, got the same clothing kind of made, and he insisted on wearing silk underwear during all of his scenes because that's what Capone wore.
Thanks for noticing.
I wasn't looking, but I just heard.
And from multiple sources, said the baseball scene actually did happen in real life. So
a version of it did, And I think that's where, again, you get to use those true events to elevate the story, to push your narrative, even if it's the details of that are slightly off. And it's, again, Charles Martin Smith's character in the film is not a real person. It's not based on a real. It's based on a few partial people that were in this group, and so in that way he's able to be used for, I don't want to say comic relief, but I think he's the everyman who we aspire to all be better people, and we see him and he's an accountant that takes up arms and fights corruption, and when he has these moments where he's in that gunfight scene and he's yelping and yowling, and then he sees, of course, the Drew's coming out and he's like,
nobody's with them. So you have which I emphasize always, you have a little bit of comedy involved.
Yeah.
Which is not, it's not a comedy film, but you have enough to have another experience of emotions on the spectrum when you watch.
Well, yeah, and with his character, Smith, of course, being a director, in fact, you have like 4 out of the 5 main characters in the film are also directors.
Yeah, Kevin Costner was wanted to direct. Yeah.
So you have Smith directing in this film, and he knows he didn't like the idea of playing a comedic kind of character, and he pushed back on De Palma for that, and it wasn't until he just said, okay, it's not my movie, I need to trust the director, that he kind of took on a little bit of that, and he knew De Palma wouldn't betray him. He knew, but he trusted the filmmaker, and none of that comedy feels forced, none of it feels out of place. It flows, and it makes you love this character so much.
Usually when I talk writing, I always say there's some kind of barometer character, somebody that we are scared when they're scared, we're angry when they're angry. And Sean Connery's character definitely is the barometer character. Here, when he's calm, we're all calm. They're all anxious about kidnapping them out in the woods. They're in the cabin waiting, and he's, well, time will tell us. And he's sitting relaxed. Well, we're going to be relaxed. When it's time to be angry, we're going to be angry. And of course, he is the catalyst. So when he goes away, that amps up the environment where you better look out. Now Elliot Ness is unhinged, right? Because he was almost protecting him.
Yeah, he's kind of allowing Elliot to go a little bit further. He's pushing Elliot's like envelope. Yeah. And when his character is absent from the film, Elliot doesn't have someone telling him not to keep ratcheting things up.
Right.
And he allows himself to
go. Yeah, and you feel that when you watch it. Like, oh, well, he's not there anymore. He doesn't have a mentor.
Yeah. Side note, though, you mentioned that he's trying to make everyone calm inside that building. You know, tell him stamp your feet if you're cold. He is pacing back and forth that entire scene. So, like, I was thinking to myself, like, he exudes calmness, but even under the surface, he's never really calm. And I love that about him is that sometimes it's you convincing yourself to be brave. And I think that, for me, it felt like that was a Malone thing, was that Malone's never been brave on the inside the way he is on the outside, but he convinces himself, you know? And I think that makes him like a very everyman kind of character. I mean, he's a side cop,
So it's definitely the music. I like the editing for it. It won a bunch of awards. And not only Sean Connery. And
Sean Connery's only Oscar came from this movie.
And he's in it not very long, but the movie doesn't feel very long. It goes very fast.
Yeah, it's a hustler movie. Like it keeps going, keeps stepping things up. And one other thing I appreciate about the film is that it doesn't feel like the ending is forcibly big. The biggest sequence in the film is those steps sequence, I would say. Yeah. The ending itself is not trying to be a big bombastic ending. I've always said your ending is not always got to be the biggest set piece in the
film. And I always forget because I see that ending and you get that little... the slight little chuckle out of it after you're going through all the spectrum and whimsical and everything, and that ending, which is perfectly you need to do. You need to kind of deflate and make a mockery of the whole event, that kind of why we're here.
Oh yeah, because it is a mockery. Like at times it is a mockery. Like how the system is working against the very people trying to fix the system, and how like the Untouchables may be the only untouched people in Chicago. They may be the only ones who really aren't bought into it, you know?
Yeah.
And I really like that they're fighting that the whole
time. It feels wonderful. I think, you see Elliot Ness' family life, it's kind of threatened. I like the stance of the introduction to characters, even the bad guys, of him stalking his house and then drive away. And then, eventually, wonderful. And
Billy Trago.
And Brian De Palma plays on exaggeration. So if you have a very exaggerated, wonderful feature face, he's going to put you in a movie. And I think that was perfectly cast. Even with William Finley, his favorite, the bookkeeper. Of course, he's going to have big, thick glasses and be bookish and nerdish. And so Brian De Palma plays on exaggerations. Almost balancing on cliches. I mean, even Kevin Costner playing Elliot Ness is kind of the very epitome of a cliche.
He's a golden boy, you know, and I mean that's kind of what Costner is in the film circuit. Well, the thing is, though, this is so early for Costner. I mean, he'd done movies at this point, but he hadn't become Kevin Costner at this point. He was still kind of a lesser known actor, and to put him in the cast, De Palma was told you can put anyone in this movie you want because it doesn't require big stars. It's got a name like The Untouchables. the people that want to see it are going to see it.
Yeah, it's one of my reasons you can cast anybody as Batman, but his villains need to be perfectly cast. You can have anybody in the suit and say the lines, and all you just, do the click. That works. That works, but your villains have to be cast. And like this movie, Kevin Costner does it. I think he does that very vanilla American mythos that he's would become known for.
Yeah.
And here you have De Niro doing Loud. Right?
Yeah. And De Niro is to me maybe the one thing that I can see where the faults lie with the movie. I like him in the movie, but he's not written to have a whole lot. Al Capone is not a major player in the movie. No. The only thing to have De Niro in this movie is because I do believe you need a name to play Al Capone. Yeah. Because he has to punch those scenes. He's not in many of them. And because you have to remember that he's even in the movie. Because it's really not Al Capone's story.
No.
And I think
you're right. Yeah.
If you don't have a memorable actor that's really going to punch those moments, they will become forgettable because he's kind of he's kind of just bleeding through the story.
Yeah, it's kind of bleeding through. David Mamet is one of those writers, and I think this is not a staple of David Mamet. He's a good writer, but this is one that he likes to write characters that are very almost like poker players, because he loves poker, where they're very reserved. They're not showing their whole hands, and that's not a staple to this movie because it's written straightforward. This is very clean cut, good guy, bad guy, good dialogue, bad dialogue.
That's why it's so unusual. Is because like you said, with De Palma's directing, it's not very it's not very heavy on the things that De Palma's known for. This is the same thing with Mamet. I would not have known this was his screenplay.
And one of the things I've been a comic book artist, comic book writer, and I watch this, and I think this is actually more of a comic book movie, like a superhero movie, than any of like Brian De Palma's other stuff.
Yeah, it almost felt like a Frank Miller graphic novel where the good guys are wearing their hats and the bad guys are all in the black suits, and it felt very much almost like a Sin City kind of quality novel, to it, Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if somebody would adapt this kind of film version onto a comic book and it would translate very well.
Yeah, it's got that pulpiness, but that's again something that I do think De Palma is reservedly good at, is that he creates something that looks good on the page.
Yeah.
If you printed off random sequences from this film onto paper, you could look at it like an art book and think it's really lovely. This is in so many ways De Palma making a classic pre-Godfather gangster movie, because he's aware of what came before with Godfather. 5-second spoiler: anybody who drinks, any federal agent or cop who drinks in the movie, it's like the orange in The Godfather. Anyone who has an orange, a present, someone's going to die. Anytime there's drinking going on by a cop or federal agent, someone's going to die. He's aware of what's kind of known in the area, but he makes a pre-code almost gangster movie that's more reminiscent of the original Scarface.
I'm glad you cited Godfather, because I was going to bring him a next step, because here with writing, you always talk about bad guys aren't bad all the time, or here, bad guy is bad all the time.
Yeah.
But like in The Godfather, they want to project that bad guys aren't bad all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But here, Kevin Costner is not the good guy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, he's craving publicity.
Yep.
To the point that that's his flaw. And so there's a flip to where The Godfather emphasized bad guys aren't bad all the time. Here, good guys aren't necessarily good all the time.
Okay.
So,
I agree with that, in that slowly his moral ground is degrading. Yeah. And he's a family man who is losing sight of his own humanity in his search for, I don't want to say vengeance, his search for justice. Yeah. And he's concerned that he is, and that's a constant moral struggle he has, is concerned that he is passing a point where he won't be able to return to his moral ground.
Yeah. Which is the flaw beginning of the movie, where they do the raid and it doesn't turn out well, even though he brings the photos and photo ops and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of the punch in his nose the first time, kind of a metaphorical punch in the nose.
I think he believes that he's right and that righteous people win. They don't. You have to sometimes give up the righteousness.
Yeah. To the point that he was kind of reluctant to join in with Jimmy Malone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That struggle is real the entire film. So
yeah, and we go back to that. But Jimmy Malone almost forced himself onto.
It's true.
Elliot Ness, which he was very reluctant. Yeah, I do like that scene where he puts the club right on his chest, like,
"Yep,
I'm still the boss." Right?
Oh yeah, and that's how you have to be with John Connery. But anyway, folks, that's our thoughts on The Untouchables. I think the movie's fabulous. It's one of
It's fantastic.
It's unsung. I think it's more unsung than it should be. because it is the least De Palma, least Mamet film of it.
Like I said, I love Brian De Palma. I'm a Brian De Palma fan, and I don't know why this is one of, and like at the beginning for it, it's straightforward, which is very rare for him.
Yeah. So, we're always standing by the good guys. You guys can stand by the good guys too by commenting on this video, by liking this video, by subscribing to this video, by checking out the Patreon. The link's down in the description, patreon.com/KyleNickOnFilm. We really appreciate all the help, and we love bringing different wild episodes for season 3 of Kyle and Nick on Film. Once again, guys, you can find my film reviews on goatfilmreviews.com.
And you can find my podcast, the St. Paul Filmcast, on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play. And that's us. I think we're going to have a drink.
Yeah.